wanted to come to Iran. I want to start by asking you about how the Iranians have reacted over the past 1 year to Israeli provocations. In the Western media, they're portrayed as irrational actors, but really they have been really restrained in responding to the Israeli provocations. So, what thinking has dominated in the Iranian establishment to respond to these provocations in such a restrained manner?
Well, this is firstly an asymmetric war on all sides that are facing Israel. Israel is one of the world's most powerful militaries. It has a blank check from the United States, more or less, for extreme military power, not only acquisition of military assets and materiel, but actually a total blank check for committing genocide against civilians and operates with total political impunity, which is the absolute opposite of what the resistance axis faces. And they're basically delegitimized at every level by an international system stacked against them. So there's that. But there's a basic difference in capabilities here that we have to see. Israel is a nuclear state. Nobody talks about not nobody, but the Western states do not find that to be a problem. Well, Iran and Hezbollah and everybody knows that Israel is a nuclear armed state. So they carry the potential of using nuclear weapons against them, which will obviously be a horrific disaster and cause hundreds of thousands or millions potentially of Iranian or Arab deaths if should they decide to use a nuclear weapon. Now, the Israelis can't really use a nuclear weapon in Gaza because they would be affected. Lebanon probably too, but Iran is far enough away that a nuclear strike could be within the realm of possibility. So they have to count on the worst case scenario. These states, they know they're weaker. Now, there's many ways that Iran has eroded the vast economic and military superiority and richness that Israel has through its missile program, which is a more efficient allocation of resources than Israel's F-35 or other programs. I mean, but it doesn't really matter. Israel has a complete blank check for more or less in spending and military spending and procurement and use, which Iran does not have. Iran is facing extreme sanctions from the United States. They can't operate freely, so they have to be careful in how much they can bear. There's been inflation crises and economic crises in Iran. So people, and on top of that, political crises after the women life freedom movement and mobilization that resulted in a very large opposition mobilization in Iran several years ago, and a lot of negative international pressure on the Iranian regime because of that. So they're weaker in many cases. Now, in other cases, the actual Iran is not ultimately just bereft of any agency at all. That's not what I'm saying, or bereft of power. In fact, they're using their power in a way that they're trying to calculate how to exert pressure and exact the cost on Israel in order for it to stop the genocide in Gaza and to end the war. That's been clearly stated as both Hezbollah and Iran and Hamas's aims. After that, now Hamas launched the Al Aqsa flood without, and all the evidence, all the indication that we can see is that neither Iran or Hezbollah knew anything about the timing of that attack, or were not informed or consulted about the launching of that attack. So both Iran and Hezbollah have had to carefully calibrate their responses to exact the cost to try to put pressure on Israel to stop, but without leading to an all-out war. And that's really what the calculations have been, and that worked for some time in Lebanon. But then you see what happened over the last month. The incredible escalation of aggression in Lebanon. That nobody's holding Israel back. So the Iranian leaders are watching that, and they know that should a bigger war, should they decide to immediately launch a war all out, they will be they will confront an Israeli adversary that has all options on the table, and it will be not restrained in no way by any international community. So they have to balance um, their actions and carefully weigh them against likely outcomes.
So my last few question would be, one is the recent election of Masoud Pezeshkian as president. So he seems to be warming up to the West through his. It's evident through his repeated statements at the UN and to media. So do you think he'll be able to successfully renegotiate the JCPOA or improve ties with the West? And my last question would be, how do you assess the Iranian-Saudi relations ever since the Chinese mediation resulted in a detente? And do you think it will continue because they held military drills together last week as well, and they have defied Western expectations? So how do you assess all of this?
The new Iranian president, Pezeshkian, was elected, and he was a reformist candidate, clearly a entirely different political line than the previous president and his opponent in Iran. And he's run on a more open, liberalizing, internally and externally platform, and he was not disqualified or whatever. This is obviously indication that the supreme leader was okay with that happening, but Pezeshkian does not ultimately call all the final shots. We know that, or we know that the supreme leader does, and I think, and that illustrates that Iran is open to dialogue with the West, even from the supreme leader up downwards, and especially the president. They advocate for this dialogue. They want to renegotiate something, but I just don't think we see no indication that the West, principally the United States, is going to reciprocate that in any way. It would be politically radioactive in American domestic politics for somebody to re-enter an agreement with Iran now because of the media campaign against Iran, and the Israel lobby's campaign against Iran, the Israel itself's campaign against Iran. They have anathemized successfully the Iranian state as being beyond the pale. Israel is not beyond the pale, which is doing far worse atrocities than any other state in the world, actually. But for them, they've built, since the revolution of 1979, an extraordinary wall of hostility around the Islamic Republic of Iran, and there's going to be really very difficult for any Western politician to back down from that domestically within their own constituencies, where the far right is on the rise, Islamophobia is openly stoked, genocide is being legitimated and normalized. I don't really see it happening. Now, as for the Saudi-Iranian rapprochement, Iran and Saudi Arabia have been locked in a heated regional rivalry over the last decade or so, especially since the Arab uprisings of 2011, sponsoring different domestic factions in all these states, and having entirely and completely, utterly opposed international agenda than each other, whereas Saudi Arabia is a firm component within the umbrella of U.S. empire and hegemony, and Iran is leading an anti-systemic alliance trying to revise the global system in order to have, some degree of political sovereignty and to relieve sanctions and be able to determine its own path. I mean, the revolution was fought against an American dictatorship that crushed and overthrew a democratically elected president in the 1950s. So, like, the struggle against American hegemony and domination is structurally built in to the Iranian state, which is not in Saudi Arabia. Now, these two powers also know that their competition is dangerous and can lead to dangerous excesses. It can lead to the escalation of ultimately unwanted conflicts. So they've actually stepped back from the brink in the last couple of years and reopened a dialogue, which has not gone very far. And I don't expect it to either, because their policy preferences, their interests, the way these two states conceive of their interests are radically opposed. They are interested in putting a lid on some conflict, but it's not looking like, I don't expect Saudi Arabia to jump into the resistance axis anytime soon,
Well,
or vice
Professor George,
versa,
pardon? Oh,
or for Iran to give up its resistance axis and join the American camp. Either that's just not going to happen, but a slow. No, I mean, we're just talking about renormalization of relations so far, and I don't expect to get much further than that.
probably take a couple of years, I guess, probably a decade or so before. Okay, well, Professor George, that was a great conversation. I loved your insights, and thankful for your time, and I loved hosting you, and I hope to host you once again when your time permits. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Prajwal, for having me, and best of luck. I
Thank
look
you.
forward to the future visits.